there's some of it gets misconstrued because OpenRAN is getting tagged. Open interfaces and OpenRAN are tagged together.
Yeah.
Right. And certainly, we believe that from a governmental perspective, there should be policy about open interfaces for competition purposes. But then beyond that, it should be fair market principles. How people build it, how they develop it should be totally open to the market. It just really, comes down to the principles that, if we're going to have telecommunication networks or whatever network, we need open interfaces. Look what would happen if the car industry hadn't sorted this out. The car industry sorted it out, and you can swap wheel nuts from one car to another. But in telecommunications at the moment, you can't do that.
And that's impossible to argue.
And that's why we're in a situation we're in. And I think if government stays focused at just ensuring the policies and the frameworks are in place for open interfaces, and I think this is still the struggle in the US.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. As promised, we got a special guest this week. We've got John Baker from Mavenir. Welcome, John.
Yeah, great. Pleasure to be here.
I can't quite remember your job title, but you were telling me earlier how Ian has framed you in some of his writing in the past.
Ian caused me no end of trouble with a cult leader and the high priest of OpenRAN.
Right, so here we are. For the purpose of this podcast, we're going to call you the high priest of OpenRAN, because that kind of frames what our main segment's going to be, is to chat about OpenRAN and all that sort of thing. And Mavenir, of course, is a software vendor that's very active in that space.
Mavenir is actually the best kept secret in the industry, I think. We're a complete end-to-end system provider, 6,000 people now globally, multi-billion-dollar valuation.
Look at him wheeling out his boilerplate.
Not just OpenRAN, obviously. There's a lot more going on, isn't there?
But I think the hidden piece about Mavenir has been really pushing virtualization for the last 15
that's what
years.
That's what I spoke to you about when OpenRAN was just a glint in the milkman's eye.
Yeah, and we got like 39% of the IMS core space against Nokia and Ericsson, so we compete head on in the marketplace. And
as you can see, John's also a bit of an evangelist.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll hear more flattering data points from you as the time goes on.
Absolutely.
So no, that's great. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and you come over from the States, I presume not just for this.
No. I had a couple of meetings yesterday, and I think the UK is getting back to normal. So
quite a pleasure. Where are you based in the States?
In Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Okay, so Texas hasn't been too bad as far as COVID mania goes.
I think
it's not like New York and California. And
exactly.
Stuff. Yeah.
But no, the UK is again ahead of everybody else, thank goodness. So.
Yeah, thank God.
I think everybody's had it now. So
yeah. I know you haven't got anything to worry about with me.
No, just got to get past the test going back, and there was nothing needed coming here.
Yeah.
And then as the other, I've been doing Dry January, but John and his team who are in the background here, say hello, team. Hello. There we are. They said, let's go to the pub after. And I did a very brief bit of soul searching and thought, there's no fucking way I'm going to the pub and not having a pint. So I'm going to, just for today, and then I'll break it properly next week, but just for today, I'm going to interrupt my Dry January. So here's my first drink for 3 weeks. Hooray.
You're going to interrupt it 2 days before the end of January as well, yeah?
Well, that was always the case. I was going to give up this folly on the 28th. And get back to business as usual.
Yeah, otherwise you've got to wait a whole week of February as well, haven't you?
I thought I'd have some cheeky ones today in honour of our guest. It's not much else to talk about. As John alluded to, we seem to be sort of opening up. For all his many missteps, the Prime Minister does seem to have realised that some nuance is required with all this COVID absolutism. And I think, I was looking at the curve, because it kind of went exponential, the curve infections, I think almost entirely due to Omicron. And then it fell off just as quickly. It was like a needle.
Yeah.
They halved. Last when I looked in the middle of this week or something, they'd halved week on week.
Wow, that's great.
So, my prediction that I wrote at the end of last year that this might be the beginning of the end, I'm feeling a bit more confident about now.
Till the next dodgy thing comes over from China.
Till the next.
Yeah, well, until we have to start getting into Norse letters or numbers or whatever. So that's all good news. I didn't wear a mask on the train today, just to see if anyone would do anything. And even the lady coming and asking my ticket didn't say shit. And she had she had the old chin look.
Well, they can't be bothered to enforce it because they're not police.
Yeah,
and
well, there's that as
get
well.
into arguments with rowdy people like you.
Yeah, well, that's my only concern when I'm not wearing a mask. I'm just wondering whether some sort of young man with a chip on his shoulder is going to come up and go, "Put your mask on, in it," and then I'll have a sort of dilemma, so whether to risk confrontation with an exuberant youth. But that hasn't happened, thankfully. And then as of next Thursday, because that's the other reason, he said, like, as of next Thursday, you don't have to wear a mask on a train. And I thought, what, so I do today, but not in 6 days? That's bollocks. So I didn't.
Yeah, that's what I thought last night when the announcement came out that everybody's going to stop today.
Yeah,
Exactly. I think a lot of people will have thought that anyway because they just don't listen to the details.
But
of the
some
dates,
people,
so.
the people who, for example, obey the speed limit to the last mile, they'll be wearing a mask.
My sister will be like that.
Right.
She was the one who strictly enforced no family Christmas if any of you have got
Right.
it and all this.
So
Because we were still debating it when I got it, and my parents were
Right.
like, "Oh, you should come anyway. We don't really care." My sister was like, "No, there's no way we're doing that." So, I mean, I probably wouldn't have gone anyway.
She's
'cause
more
if they-
devout than you.
Yeah, I think if I'd gone and they got ill, I'd have felt really bad. So
Was it? I mean, like we said last time, the only reason I tested myself was so I didn't want to arse up Pierre's holiday.
yeah.
Didn't bring me back any fucking maple syrup or anything, did you? Yeah. I know. This is
Did you
is
want
shocking.
some? Did you actually want some?
It's the principle of the thing.
Okay,
Neil.
sure.
Yeah, like you should reward me
ice
for
wine.
not infecting you with the plague anyway.
I should have brought you some ice wine. Apparently, it's
Ice
a
wine?
thing there. Yeah.
That's
It's like
a
a
thing.
white, sweet, dessert wine.
I don't know,
It's
you're not
pretty
selling
nice.
it to me.
No.
Was it like a sort of shit version of Sauterne?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's that. Not too much else to chat about. Oh, other than that, this is probably the last one we film in this studio, last pod in this studio, because we're moving studio. Last week I sort of obliquely referred to
I didn't realise
renovations.
it was that imminent, but
Those renovations consist of fuck off to the other office, which is just down the road.
Yeah.
Pierre's been there.
Yeah.
Studio's a sort of equivalent size. You're gonna plaster it and all this stuff. Are you gonna get new ones? Or are you gonna try and recycle these?
No, these won't recycle. We'll try to get
Nah,
something new.
Get new ones.
We'll see.
Splash the cash.
It
mate.
won't be ready next week, but it'll be a smoother transition than last time.
So
let's say.
how are we going to film it? We're just going to be in a not ready studio.
Yeah, we'll have
It'll
all
just be
the
a bit
video.
echoey or whatever.
Yeah, it's not echoey. It's just the background will be different.
it'll be there apart from the beer fridge.
We should, maybe
No,
we
I'm
should
bringing that too.
maybe we should get green screen and just muck around with the background every week.
Yeah,
Terrible. Good idea.
That would get old pretty quickly.
yeah,
wouldn't
very quickly.
it? So yes. So before I get into what we're going to chat about, I will remind you that if you're watching this on the site or on Facebook or on YouTube, you can also listen to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and loads of other podcasting platforms. So obviously, our first item is going to be OpenRAN. The positioning's not massively dissimilar to how it was when Danielle Royston was here, in so much as she had a clear position in favour of public cloud and telcos moving into it. John has a clear position in favour of OpenRAN. I think we've got questions, but I think we're not so much resistant to OpenRAN full stop as to just some of the claims being made on its behalf, especially in the short term.
Yeah.
So that's what we're getting to. But this is also a great opportunity for us, or speaking only for myself, and our audience to learn a bit more about what's actually going on, test some of our suppositions and all that sort of thing from a genuine expert. So I look forward to that. Then, I'll probably dominate the time, but we've got to chat about a couple of other things. I think this thing in the States, especially as John is based in the US, although you've heroically held on to your English accent. I must say, how long have you been in the US?
26, 27
26
years.
years.
Yep.
Yeah. I've only heard a slight trace of Mid-Atlanticness.
Yep.
So well done. Do you say tomato?
Tomatoes.
Okay.
Oh, you belong in a Hitchcock movie.
Do you say yogurt?
Oh yeah, yogurt.
You don't say
Yeah.
yogurt?
No.
Okay, so you say tomatoes, but you say yogurt.
Yeah.
That puts you at about a sort of 2 or 3
About
on the
50-50,
Mid-Atlantic.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. Do you say herbs?
What are they?
What about
Would you say herbs or herbs?
Herbs.
Yeah.
what about H2O? You pronounce that?
Water.
Oh, what? Oh, okay.
I didn't know
that's
you
the
said
one that
H
confuses
instead
people
of
at the
H.
bar when you go and order a glass of water at the bar in America. They go, "What? Water?"
What, the water as a word in an English
using-
accent
yeah,
just wrecks
I've
their
had
head.
that several times when I
Yeah.
was living in San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Oh yeah, it's clearly two nations divided by a common language.
I don't think it is that. I think they're just saying, "Don't be soft, have a beer."
Maybe they are.
Yeah. Water? What's wrong with you?
I can't imagine why I was ordering water anyway 20 odd years ago when I was.
This is something we're going to have to pick up afterwards.
Water is beer over some of it.
Although I know, John, you're on. You're taking the opportunity to have some proper English ale. You're a bit of Green King, and you didn't take any chances. You brought in 8 daddy-sized beers.
Yeah.
So we'll see how you do with them. What was the other one you got?
We can,
some other ale anyway.
We can nick John's beer though, can't we?
Speckled hen. I used to drink speckled hen as a
I might
student.
nick one of John's old speckled hens.
I used to get fucked up on speckled hen.
Yeah.
COVID supply chain has restricted English beer in the States. So.
Good stuff. Right, so we'll start off by talking about OpenRAN, and then I think we're going to talk because, but mainly because it's in the news, but also perhaps John can provide some perspective from the other side of the pond on this continuing silliness going on with AT&T and Verizon trying to roll out their C-band 5G spectrum, and planes going, nah, you can't do that. You're going to make us crash. Yeah. And I just think it's farcical. Mm. So we'll have a little look at that, and I think we're going to finish off. There was some mega M&A this week with Microsoft looking to buy one of the biggest games publishers, Activision Blizzard, and that led you to sort of write, or at least contributed to a piece you wrote, mulling, because one of the angles that was purported, that one of the reasons why they buy it is because they're banging on about the metaverse in some vague way.
Along with all the other tech firms.
Yes, indeed. And so you had a little think about the metaverse and how that affects our day job.
Yeah.
And also
Telecom.
cheaper now because of some scandals.
What's that?
Aren't they? Activision?
Yeah, Activision Blizzard had a sex
some
harassment scandal,
yeah.
so they are cheaper than they were, than they would have been. Yeah, it's true.
There's not many companies where their CEO hasn't been done for.
I don't know the details of it. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to that side of things.
Shouldn't dwell on it.
It was a bit of
because I'm sure
it wasn't really an industry thing.
I'm sure their lawyers listen to every podcast. So we'll just say whoever it is, I'm sure he's a great bloke.
Allegedly everything.
Yeah, allegedly everything. Reportedly.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll do. So let's get straight in. I think the best way to frame it will be to sort of pass the ball to you, John, and just say, I mean, put in like Scott language, what's the point of OpenRAN?
Yeah, it's a really good starting place. In reality, where it all started back 4.5 years ago through XRAN, it was at the time, and there was like 4 or 5 companies, Intel, Verizon, Mavenir, and and really just focused on just producing an interface specification that could become public to replace this proprietary CIPRI specification.
And can we go one step further back and remind us what CIPRI is and what this interface is between? Yeah,
and it goes back almost 20 plus years when, originally when the GSM MOU was signed, it was about, producing equipment for a global market with open interfaces. So, through competition, allowing competition and generating a global marketplace for mobile telecommunications. And then, as technology evolved, the radio got split out of the base station. And, from a 3GPP perspective, nobody really ever focused down on the specification between the radio and the control for the radio. And, Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, and NEC formed this CIPRI cooperation group outside of 3GPP. And it's a bit like, okay, well, there's, you can draw the equivalence to that's how ORAN started.
Yeah,
and that group has never been. It's not a standards body. It's just a group of companies that got together but produced a proprietary specification, and then promoted that as what they were going to deliver to the operators.
So how did that? I mean, just jumping in because I've never dug into that before, John. But it seems odd that they went outside the main standards group to develop this thing that has then been quite controversial later on and has led to this sort of argument that Mavenir and other sort of Open RAN proponents put forward, that it's allowed this sort of lock-in to exist. But it seems odd that it got sort of taken outside standardisation anyway. And as you say, you've got these 4 companies that look very cartel-like when it sort of gets looked at that way.
And and this is where you hear some of the story about ORAN not being a standards group. Well, in reality, the CIPRI Corporation is not a standards group. So there's a direct comparison of how this started. But
good point.
But 3GPP, never got their arms around this, and and it goes back, I think, to also the control within 3GPP that you end up with the Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, controlling what gets adopted and what doesn't get adopted.
So what is the scope? I mean, 3GPP is who we associate with the Gs, isn't it?
Yep.
And what is the core scope? I mean, is it more the actual sort of radio and spectrum stuff, or is their scope supposed to be everything to do with producing a mobile signal?
It's everything produced in the end-to-end mobile network, and and primarily it's about keeping the air interface open so that you've got global mobile telecommunication manufacturers making equipment, and mobiles will work on a country-to-country basis.
So you don't have one macro cell that will only talk to one kind of device or one kind of operator.
And the interfaces in the core were kept open, and to the extent that that's been healthy competition in the core, and that's how Mavenir competes. We don't have a challenge. We compete on good commercial quality products, competing against the others. But in the RAN space, and I think it came down to that people saw the volume of radio equipment that was needed, and the value of that market it was a $35 billion market today. And trying to say, okay, how can we lock this down? And at the time, I think there was probably 10 companies when it all started, and then slowly over time they got consolidated.
Yeah.
And they've used the ability to use this proprietary interface to basically swap out old vendors' equipment and put their own in there. So over time, people have made a lot of money out of this proprietariness, but the challenge is, as the industry consolidates, you're down to essentially including Huawei, you've got 3 suppliers in the marketplace.
Primarily, yeah. And of course, as I'm sure we'll come on to, we've removed Huawei from a lot of those marketplaces, which has created this sort of circular paradox, where now one of the reasons, and this is one of the things I slightly push back on, but I might park it, but we've created this paradox whereby OpenRAN is also being pushed by people outside of stakeholders like Mavenir, because it's considered to sort of solve certain political problems, which I'm not sure it does, but that's just yet another way in which it's become, a really big topic.
Yeah, well, I think the politics of it came up because what's happened over time is that in reality the US has no telecommunications industry of its own anymore.
Yeah,
right. And I have to argue the same could be said for the UK. When I started here in the UK, we bought with Vodafone, there was conditions in contracts that if Cellnet bought equipment, for instance, they had to have UK suppliers sitting there supplying equipment.
Yeah. Oh, really? It's just a prerequisite.
It's a prerequisite of the deal.
Didn't know we were that protectionist back in the day.
and so
it's pre-globalization.
But you look at it. There was Nokia, Motorola, Nortel. Yeah. Very vibrant telecommunications industry in the UK. And what's left now? Nothing.
But some of those firms are also. I mean, you go back and you had companies like Lucent, obviously.
And you had Lucent to that. Yeah.
I mean, do you think that the consolidation that's happened and the kind of decline of a lot of these companies, and the fact that it has all become Ericsson, Huawei, and Nokia is because a lot of the blame for that often gets laid at the door of Huawei, doesn't it? That this Chinese company came along that was able to undercut a lot of the Western players and was also not really penalised for. I mean, I don't want to allegedly for sort of taking intellectual property and reverse engineering Cisco routers is always the accusation that gets made, isn't it? And things like this. And never any hard proof that I've seen of them doing that, but there were allegations for years that this sort of thing was.
And I'm sure no one else has ever reverse engineered any shit.
No, of course not. No.
there's a great book that's just been published. And
I think we had some of it on light reading.
Wireless Wars by John Pilson. And it reads like a spy thriller. If you didn't know the people in the book, you would say, okay, this is a spy thriller that's waiting for a film. But in reality, it's because people didn't push back on the pricing issue that pushed the Nokias and Ericssons into China. And to that extent, you look at the numbers of R&D people for those two companies in China now. There's probably 50% plus of their R&D is actually in China.
But do you think OpenRAN and proprietary lock-in and that system that kind of was there in the sort of 2000s and throughout the sort of whole of the 4G era really had anything to do with this? I mean, if we did have interoperability and we had alternatives to CIPRI back then and it hadn't sort of developed the way it has, would it have made it less likely that the industry consolidated the way it has?
Can I just say quickly before you answer, this beer's not touching the fucking sides. Over to you, John, answering Ian's question.
No, I think part of it, I put fairly and squarely at 3GPP, and 3GPP did not evolve as the technology evolved, and some of that you could argue was controlled by the key companies that were in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
I think there's still a danger of that going forward, because there's nothing coming out of 3GPP to say that we're going to continue to support open interfaces, right? And I think that's why ORAN, if you like, has taken that. But
they're surely going to have to back down at some point. I mean, it seems, because I can see what ORAN's done, and it's now compelled companies that, I mean, maybe it's unfair to say Nokia was resistant, because I know they've been involved in the XRAN.
Yeah, no, they were the sixth company.
But Ericsson's often perceived to be more resistant, and you can see them having to move simply because their customers are asking for it. If you carry on saying you can't go along with this, then ultimately you're going to go the way of Kodak or something.
Yeah, so, I've been using that line.
Yeah,
this is a Kodak moment about to happen.
If these companies themselves, the big ones, apart from Huawei, are now active in the ORAN alliance, and they start to develop products that are ORAN compatible, and I think there's an expectation that's going to happen in the 2020s. Does it then just become pointless to keep it outside the 3GPP kind of thing? It gets taken back in.
I think the problem with 3GPP, it becomes so dominated by the three main vendors, and it's how do smaller companies contribute, and ORAN actually gave a vehicle for small companies to contribute, and like Mavinet, at the time we weren't in the RAN business, and but our key target was to get an open interface for the RAN, and make sure that the management plane was specified such that you couldn't get this vendor locking anymore, and that was our key focus, that the management plane was fully specified and people could make product and interoperate product, and it's proven to work, and I think in some respects that. What's going to happen, I think, globally now, is that parts of specifications will get developed elsewhere, and then they just get accumulated in. And I believe the ORAN specs now are already been passed across to 3GPP.
Oh, they have. Okay.
For accreditation, if you like, into the process.
Because I think one of the expectations with 6G, and no one really knows what 6G is at the moment, obviously, but a lot of people say OpenRAN, or
Nokia thinks it knows,
whatever you want to call OpenRAN by them. But the principle of openness and interoperability will sort of be built into 6G from the outset.
It has to be. Has to be, and because I think the great thing about it is I look at it and look at the slide I presented 4 years ago at 5G World in London, and there were 6 companies on there at XRAN, and and the message was this is what's going to happen and open up the industry, and it really has done, and it's just one interface specification has turned this whole industry on its head.
And I've got to say, for the record, I'm entirely in favour of the concept of OpenRAN. Yeah. I'm very much a sort of laissez-faire free marketeer by instinct, and anything that increases competition, anything that lowers barriers to entry, everything, when we were, and we might mention this, when I was chatting to Jamie, who once sat where you sit now, but who's now at Vodafone, and he was telling me about them firing up their first OpenRAN site prior to the story, and I was giving him sort of my objections, just like, the
OpenRAN side that's not really open.
Well, quite, yeah. we can get onto that. And well, this is where Jamie, and fair play to him. This is where Jamie took the trouble to ring us both up, because he knows us well enough to know that if there's a press release that says we've got an OpenRAN site, brackets except for the antenna.
Except it is an OpenRAN.
Yeah.
Still uses CIPRI.
It still uses CIPRI, does it?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I didn't know that. Well, of course, I suppose it has to for it to.
Well, I think what's happened is that I think Keith actually did a very good piece on this, where he asked some proper questions.
Keith from the Mobile Network.
Yeah, Keith Dyer from the Mobile Network, and wrote a good piece where it looks like what's happened is it almost sounds like the radios are now in the sort of testing phase with Keysight, and the other one that's sort of doing testing in the lab.
Yeah.
But until they go through that, they can't.
Gemini, wasn't it?
But
it's hard to see, because
it's hard to say, because that wasn't said in the press release. They sort of said they hadn't delivered them, and then I did ask Samsung and NEC, and they were very evasive and didn't really answer, probably because they don't want to upset Vodafone, but.
Well, no, they were in the Plugfest in Japan, and
right.
and there's clear slides showing the Samsung.
Well, it seems odd to me that
Samsung
NEC
radio.
wouldn't be able to deliver compatible radios, because they've been doing it in Japan for a while.
Well, we partnered with NEC like 2.5 years ago, because I remember the day myself and Pardeep Kohli, our CEO, was sitting in trying to persuade NEC to go into OpenRAN.
Did you do one of those MOUs where you got to take a photo of everyone signing it?
Oh yeah, something like that. Yeah. But we persuaded them. We've been working with NEC very, very closely in terms of their MIMO antennas, and we have their MIMO antennas on OpenRAN out in Deutsche Telekom and other places.
Okay.
Working today, and I think
is that in this sort of ORAN town or whatever it's called that Deutsche Telekom's? Okay, I didn't know that.
And
ORANville.
And we know that the NEC radio is fully ORAN compliant,
right?
On all 3 planes.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if they get that working against the Samsung software, then it should be fine. And I think it's great to see Samsung out there doing this stuff. But I'll make
the NEC bit's more interesting, isn't it? Because obviously Samsung's own radios with its software, you're thinking, well, that's just the same kind of setup in a way. Even if it is open, it's still using the same vendor across the two. But
in the Plugfest, Keysight were out there, with their ORAN, the front haul testers. So they clearly have, whether it be the full 3 planes of OpenRAN, but they may have 2 planes running, and they may be just finishing off the end plane or something.
And in that Vodafone sort of footprint, because I know Mavenir's done quite a lot of work with Vodafone and Test.
Wasn't a lot of Mavenir in that story, was there?
Didn't show up in the
I know they mentioned us in
sites.
some of the videos, but we've had OpenRAN in Vodafone's network now for getting on for nearly 2 years. So
how come you're not involved in that first one that just came out this week?
Yeah, so that was the first 5G deployment. So we've delivered 2G and 4G into Vodafone in some of these rural sites on the coast and some of the showgrounds that they've had up there.
Well, this is the other thing that interests me about this announcement, because there's this question mark about Samsung and 2G, where a few years ago it was apparent Samsung wasn't doing anything on 2G at all. And it wasn't that long ago, it was a couple of years ago. And then all of a sudden, when Vodafone came out with its announcement about vendors, Samsung can support 2G as well, then it's only the 3G bit we've got to worry about, which they talked about a lot at a press conference. And I've talked to people off the record on the operator side who say they're not convinced that Samsung has very strong 2G expertise, and yet they seem to. And also noticed at this OpenRAN site, when Jamie spoke to me, he said it's 4G, 5G, but we're keeping the old vendor for 2G and 3G. Which
still a bit of reverse engineering.
There's a lot of kind of unclear messages about what exactly Samsung is able to do.
I don't know clearly where they are on the 2G side of it.
But it seemed like a good opportunity.
You're not going to get him to
like,
slag off Samsung.
I know, but it just seemed like a good opportunity for someone like Mavenir to come along with the acquisition of IP Access.
Yeah.
And then be able to do something.
No, we've done it. So
2G.
we have just in fact we've commercially sold it to a customer, the 2G, 4G, 5G on the same compute hardware.
Right. Okay.
And that came out of the acquisition we did with IP Access technology.
Okay. Because otherwise you've got this problem of 2 platforms, haven't you? And then a lot of the cost arguments would become difficult to support, because it's going to be expensive to just have 2 separate things.
The 2G piece is you can say is a proprietary interface at this point in time. Now we're offering that interface to anybody who wants it. So if
because OpenRAN's not really a 2G thing.
No, and if Samsung want it, we're quite happy to work with them. And, to that extent, but you can run 2G, 4G, 5G on the same compute platform into a single radio.
Yeah. So you can do that where you have the 2G that isn't really an OpenRAN thing because it just isn't. But you also have the 4G and the 5G would support all the new specifications, and it would run over. Okay.
Exactly, and then obviously you've got to worry about all the other GSM pieces that go behind, from a network perspective, and that came out of the acquisition that we did with IP Access.
And then there's obviously a lot of the Huawei footprint that is still. It seems like it's still undecided what's going to happen.
Right.
Is a conversation still going on with Vodafone there about what they do with that, or are they sort of looking at what happens with these 2,500 sites, do you think, first, and then they're going to start thinking about the rest of them?
Everything will evolve, but the one thing I will say is that you don't have OpenRAN until you've got multiple vendors actually sitting on the same cell site. So unless you've got like a Samsung interworked with a Mavenir, or Mavenir interworked with Samsung, that's OpenRAN. Yeah. Right. The way it sits when you got Samsung, or Mavenir. That can lead to a proprietary solution again.
Yeah.
So you're kind of preempting and possibly anticipating, having listened to podcasts before, an objection that Ian and I have discussed many times on the pod, which is, the utopia for OpenRAN is this massive expansion of the vendor choice.
Yep.
Within all the bits and bobs. And do you know what? Every time I do it, I really need to go off and do some homework and actually learn all the bits that are inside a sort of macro cell or something. Because I'm kind of fucking winging it, if I'm honest.
It actually isn't very much.
There's the CU, the DU, and the RU. Those are the main bits.
Right. the CU sits in the cloud. The DU could sit in the cloud if you've got,
Can you expand those abbreviations for me, please?
distributed unit and centralized unit.
Right.
So the centralized unit is the layer 2, layer 3 software that's
Okay, so that can now all be virtualized and whacked.
Yeah,
in
and we've done that with
AWS
Amazon. In the Dish case, we're doing that with Amazon. So that if you look at Dish Network, for instance, you've got Amazon with the cloud on the layer 2, layer 3. You've got layer 1.
Dish loves a bit of AWS, doesn't it?
Yeah. And
so CIPRI would go between the DU and the RU.
Yeah,
right. Radio unit,
or
and
it's actually eCIPRI
distributed
now.
unit.
Yeah,
eCIPRI.
It's
Yeah.
eCIPRI
Right.
now.
So this is the other thing. eCIPRI
Yep.
is also Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, NEC. Is that right, or it's not? It's a broader thing.
So this was the craziness of it all.
Yeah.
And I argue that if Ericsson and Nokia had put their heads correctly to it, and just issued the spec for the interface, then half of this stuff would have been solved 3 years ago. Right, the fact that you took an eCIPRI framework which had no parameters plugged in there, and then ORAN plugged all the parameters in, made sure the security was right, etc., and published the whole specification.
Right.
Then and that's all that ORAN has really done is just reinvented, if you like, the specification that should have been published through the CIPRI Corporation Group.
And we all know, us sort of free market lovers like me, all know that. I've cited it many times. Adam Smith, back in The Wealth of Nations in the late 1700s, made it clear that if you let markets run completely unregulated, then they'll always gravitate towards monopolies, cartels, and taking the piss out of the consumer. And I'm not accusing the Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei people of anything other than pursuing their self-interest. And obviously, if they have access to a certain kind of technology that no one else does, that's going to help with their margins, with their bottom line, everything like that. So yes, that all completely stands to reason that you want to open it up. But one thing we just sort of touched upon, but I don't know if we've resolved it to my satisfaction, is at this stage, is the ecosystem open enough, and are the barriers to entry to new entrants and to interoperability between different vendors stuff? Have we got there?
It's almost there, and I think several proof points. The Plugfest that took place,
where's that come from? Plugfest. That's such a funny word.
Yeah, it came back from the internet days where you just literally pull a Cat5 plug and push it into a socket and it works. So
it sounds like some kind of festival where people bring consumer electronics or something.
Well, it's almost
and they go,
like
look, look at my toaster. Anyway.
Yeah, no. So the Plugfest that took place October, November, there was over 100 companies.
Yeah.
Right, in 11 locations. And I think when you add up the instances of companies, it came to like 141 company instances running around in these locations, basically testing and validating OpenRAN equipment.
But do you think it'll happen in the real world? I mean, because I can certainly see OpenRAN being, in terms of the technology itself, becoming widely used in the late 2020s, and that these interfaces get built into the technologies. What I'm less convinced by, I guess, is whether it really changes the competitive dynamics. And I mean, you hear people like, and I know he's only one person, but he's at a big operator, and I think there are others who have similar positions. Neil McRae at BT saying he wouldn't
thought you
really
were bring up
want
Strandy for a sec.
No, saying I wouldn't really want to increase the number of vendors that much, and because it starts to bring complexity, and you have a risk of driving up costs. I mean, will it change the competitive dynamics that much?
It will, because people are, there's innovation and competition on price, and I think the MIMO, this massive MIMO case is a real case where you can get capacity gains, performance gains by building radio antennas in a very, very different way, and I think you're going to see some of that there. But Mavenir's worked very hard with I think we've done like 10 plus radio suppliers to date, and interworked on our DU. Now we haven't done our radio on somebody else's DU, that's still to come. But we've been working with the radio community and ensuring that you can get radios that
Mavenir has its own radios. Is that right?
We are developing our own radios for specific applications such as massive MIMO. We've got a millimeter wave product, because the problem we found is that really the two best guys that manufacture radios, Nokia and Ericsson, are not going to come to Mavenir and supply radios. We've asked them, we've asked them to participate. I continue to put the offer out there. Look, we're ready to do interoperability with you guys. You say you're in OpenRAN, come and do interoperability, but they just ignore it.
But Nokia's done it with, with some Japanese companies, haven't they? They've done it with Rakuten to some extent.
If you look at the Plugfest, they didn't have a radio in there.
Right.
right? And you know, and actually back in my history, I was part of the base station team in Oulu that built the factory. And Nokia, in my mind, is one of the best companies in the world at producing radios. Yeah. And you know, if I were running that business,
you used to work at Nokia.
Yeah, I was for 7. I was running the factories here in the UK.
Okay, cool.
So
I should have looked you up on LinkedIn before we got you.
Yeah. No, I got a very been in this industry too long. So. But you know, I got a real love for the guys in Oulu. You know that they know how to make radios and some of the best radios in the world. And yeah, you know, if I was sitting there running that business, I'd make sure that theirs are the radios that are being used everywhere and offering them to everybody to interoperate.
But you know, Mavenir developing its own radios is interesting because let's say things really take off for Mavenir, and then all of a sudden it becomes easier for companies to do a deal with you where they're taking the software and we'll get the radios as well, because I'm sure it's going to be there's less people to deal with then. I'm sure you make it more commercially viable for them to do that. And I just sort of wonder whether, I mean, look at NEC is a really interesting one for me because they only started off doing radio units when it comes to OpenRAN, and then they're due to bring out a software product at Mobile World Congress.
Right.
And they've got their core software as well now, which I know isn't OpenRAN, but it's another kind of bit of the mobile puzzle. And you look at their annual report, they've got this ambition of having a fifth of the OpenRAN market by 2030. And you sort of think, well, if everybody does that, then we're only going to have 5 OpenRAN players, and we've got a market that's kind of not that much more competitive.
That's another thing that Ian and I, just to sort of augment what he said and then put it over to you, John. We've chatted a few times on the pod about replacing the incumbent ones with a oligopoly of new SIs. Do you perceive that as a day? One thing I've got to say, by the way, just I meant to say it earlier when you were chatting, Mavenir does seem, compared to some of the other specialist players in this space, to be one of the most sort of agnostic. You know, you look at people. Obviously, there's the one that that's owned by Rakuten or NEC or whatever. Who's that?
They're not. Yeah, they don't seem very agnostic at all now.
Well, quite.
By
Rakuten. Well, that's my point. Yeah. You know, I don't know. I mean, there's another...
Parallel Wireless is another one.
They're totally independent, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. So there's a few, but credit where it's due. But yes, you know, how do you respond to the claim that we're just going to replace Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei with a few dominant SIs?
Yeah, I think the system integration piece is necessary on day one because people are trying to understand the technology and just understand how the plug and play works. But as this stuff gets simplified and there's more software, the AI in terms of turn up and everything else, I think you'll see the role of a system integrator sort of level out.
Yeah. Because
in reality, OpenRAN should be about plug and play.
So, I mean, do you think that's interesting though? Because this experience that Vodafone seems to be going through, where it's got its labs up and running, and it's having to go through these tests according to the mobile network site that Keith Dyer does with these radios. I mean, will that become just a much more straightforward thing, and you don't really have to go through this months and months of lab testing? And the idea is that it does just sort of literally kind of be like building Lego, I guess, is the ideal comparison.
If you go back and say, look, open interface was the first piece of it, but the operators themselves were really frustrated with the time it took Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei to develop new features so they could compete as operators in the marketplace. You look at it, there's one roadmap, everybody gets the same, right? He who has the biggest, pays the biggest bills, if you like, to one of the vendors gets priority on choice.
Yep.
So it's very hard for a mobile operator to compete in a marketplace. So if you take the OpenRAN approach and you say, okay, well, look, there's going to be multiple vendors in multiple different markets. They're all going to innovate in a different way, right? Suddenly the operators find a way to compete.
Yeah.
Right, because they make them, and they make these vendors maybe smaller vendors in terms of the addressable market, but they're giving the operator the attention they need, and that's what they're not getting. And you read the press 2-3 years ago when Deutsche Telekom and these guys were sort of frustrated at the way their suppliers were treating them. And I think that's part of the driver behind this, and that's why if you look at Vodafone, if you like, recruiting so many software engineers.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, is that a move that you think other operators will have to make?
I've been preaching the subject that as the networks become more cloud native networks, it's just follows the internet model that you can spin up an app to put a new service in. You don't have to wait for a Nokia and Ericsson to go through their 18-month development cycle to develop it, and they can compete on that app directly.
It's quite
in
a
the
difficult thing
marketplace.
to do, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge cultural change to go from
absolutely.
having. I mean, they've got 9,000, I think, software engineers at the moment to suddenly grow to 16,000 and not incur extra costs. And you're in a market where you're trying to compete against. I mean, banks these days, as well as web giants, all want the best software talent, don't they? So it's quite a mission for them to do that.
Yeah, but I think that's the whole switch in the industry. Mavenir's got like 6,000 engineers now, and the majority of those are software engineers on a global basis. But we do what Nokia and Ericsson does with 100,000 people.
Right.
Right. We haven't got hardware to worry about from a legacy perspective. We just got the software evolution, open interfaces. Firm believer in open interfaces and compete on a competitive commercial level in the marketplace, and the rapid customization of features that you can do to turn up somebody's service. So some of the apps you see with Rakuten and Timo have come from Mavenir.
Yep.
We do everything from the app right the way through to the security gateways that sit on the on the edge of the network, and you can do that with small teams of people. You don't need armies of people to do this stuff. And one of the other my hot subjects is about the RIC App Store. And I think the App Store approach, if allow small developer groups to make money out of delivering a core app that sits on the edge of the network and saves the operator money, and I think that's where the innovation will come.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of excitement about a company called Cohere.
Cohere, yeah.
So mentioning on that side of things.
So Cohere demonstrated that they can get a 20% improvement in spectral efficiency through their RIC app, and that was a massive MIMO app. Now Mavenir.
What's RIC stand for again? I forgot.
Sorry?
What does RIC stand for again?
Radio Interface Controller.
Okay.
But it's. I
think I'd have remembered it by now, wouldn't you?
But there's another complexity around it. There's what they call the real or the near real time app RIC and the non real time RIC.
Yeah, X apps and
that came up, didn't it, in that BT thing?
So there's that confusion sitting out there, and the danger is that certain companies will turn this thing into a replacement for SON.
Yeah.
Right. Just so they can hang on to their proprietary interfaces and just do everything they do currently on SON and on their O&M on a non-real time RIC. Now, the real benefit is in the near real time RIC, where you can get at the scheduler that sits in the DU and then really manage traffic in a good way. And one of the apps Mavenir developed with and demonstrated with Airtel is on just physically handling handover with an intelligent way can again put 20% capacity saving in a network.
Yeah.
So that's where you start to see the real benefits of OpenRAN coming through. Yeah, you'll get the cost savings, and we've shown that you can get a 40% cost saving on the capex and opex.
Well, why can't an Ericsson or a Nokia do? I mean, the Cohere one's interesting for me because they have this very impressive story about spectral efficiency, and I talked to the guys not that long ago and wrote about it. But one of the questions, I guess, is if it's so good, why hasn't someone tried to buy them, I guess? And the other one is why couldn't someone with the resources of an Ericsson or Nokia that's so involved in radio, and you'll know from having worked at Nokia how good they are at radio, do that sort of thing themselves?
I think the problem with it is, and some of this goes back to having to maintain 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. This G thing is really sort of slowed the industry down in some respects. And
then we have to start getting into decimal points.
Right.
Which all gets really silly.
So there's all this legacy hardware they've got to maintain, and then there's this feature list that their customers are pushing on them. So where do you spend your R&D dollars? Right. And before ORAN, it was impossible for a startup company to sell into an operator because it was so controlled by Nokia and Ericsson. And so that's why the OpenRAN thing is so great, because you see the enthusiasm, the startup companies, the investors now placing money in the OpenRAN space, because there's now a route to sell product to the operators directly. And I think that's why you question is companies like here, eventually they're going to have value, they'll get bought, or they'll create their own world in terms of producing apps and making money out of it.
Yeah.
But now there's a mechanism for people to make money selling directly to the carriers or selling directly to system integrators. They're not gated by a large network equipment provider that you currently have, that's been in the ecosystem before. And that was what the fundamental issue was for the last 10 years. Selling radios from CommScope and guys like that. They could make radios, but how on earth do they sell them?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned systems integrators a few times, but is your view that those organisations, I don't want to attach names to them because sort of get embarrassing for people, but that they won't get used that much. I mean, more people will go down the sort of Vodafone route of trying to recruit their own software, because one of their reasons they actually gave for that when Scott and I met them at this dinner was that they don't want to be reliant on systems integrators. They want to have the kind of in-house capability to understand and do things, because it does seem that if you get, I mean, I will name one now then, actually, because Rakuten's almost becoming a sort of systems integrator. And
they got Orchestra.
That's Symphony.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to. I mean, they talk a good story about openness, and I'm impressed by everything they've managed to do, and they've obviously got amazing people there. But it's very hard to imagine that Rakuten would come along and say, "Well, we're going to make it as easy for you to build a network with Mavenir or Parallel Wireless as we are with Altiostar," simply because they own Altiostar, and there's kind of a huge conflict of interest there. And
some of this again will come down to choice, but I go back to the principles that you don't have OpenRAN unless you have two vendors of the same product in the same space. And Dish is a prime example where they've spent the effort and the time of making sure they've got two vendors in each space of the RAN.
Right. Yep.
Right. So we're there with Altiostar on the CUD.
What if one vendor's much better than the other?
Then they use that as a big stick to
beat the other one up.
But this is something we chatted about, I think, a BT thing when we were talking about the chip side of it, where Ian's written some great stuff about how currently Intel seems to dominate a certain part of the processor part of it. Mm-hmm. We all agree that the concept of OpenRAN's good, and I think it's also inevitable. So there isn't some Luddite going, "No, I'm not happy about this."
No.
But for it to be everything everyone hopes it to be, every little bit within it, you need to have at least two vendors, as you say, that are sort of kind of going toe to toe. And it's only going to be as strong as the weakest link in its chain in that one. And if you've just got one bit, for example, semiconductor part, that is only Intel, then you're still subject to this sort of closed, gated, controlled economic environment.
Yeah, and I think the Intel thing was, obviously they were 4 or 5 years ago, one of the founders of, the FlexRAN architecture. That's where Mavenir started, on the FlexRAN architecture, just to prove the principles that it could be done, right? But now, we see NVIDIA, ARM, bringing out processors.
AMD's getting involved now as well, and it bought Xilinx.
Yeah, so I think in 9 months to a year's time, the plane, the vision of compute platforms is going to be very, very different.
Is that something? I mean, that's an interesting one directly for Mavenir, though, in terms of working with companies other than Intel on the kind of processor side.
Yeah.
It's now happening, so you have an ARM-based kind of system instead of Intel in the future.
Yeah, no. So I think the last round of investment, NVIDIA invested in Mavenir. And so, we're working very closely with those guys in their platform.
We're doing where their stock price is going.
And stuff like...
bought Microsoft.
Yeah. One of the things that came up with Dish was them using these processors that I think Amazon's developed itself, the Graviton 2 stuff. But it would be possible to do a sort of OpenRAN deployment using those with Mavenir software.
The Punisher 2000.
Yeah, we already have the Layer 2, Layer 3 software running on Graviton in the Amazon network. So
right, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So this thing is moving like crazy, and I think again, you stand back and look back 4 years ago. There was me and a few others standing up there, claiming this was going to happen, but in truth, it's happened. And look at the amount of investment, R&D investment that's gone in making it happen. It's just
well, that's a good one, because we're running a little bit low on time, and we've got a couple other things we want to chat about. You've sort of teed up what I think is a good question to finish off on, if you don't mind, Ian, unless you've got any pressing, which is the future.
Yep.
So, one of the bits where Ian and I have gently pushed back on the pod in the past is like, this is all good, it's a great idea, but everyone's banging on about it. We haven't really spoken about the political part of it, but to briefly frame my perception of it is that the American government especially, having created a duopoly through its persecution, justified or otherwise, of Huawei, it is a little bit worried, and its allies, because Huawei was largely frozen out of the US market anyway, wasn't it?
Yep.
They've created this duopoly, and then they've, someone's gone, oi, there's this thing called OpenRAN, and that brings a whole lot of new vendors in. So now you haven't got duopoly anymore. Job done. Sorted.
I wish.
Yeah. And so that, you were talking earlier about how people are willing to invest in it. NVIDIA's invested in Mavenir and so on. I think one of the reasons they're willing to invest in it, one thing that's been, this is a bit of a tangent, just indulge me, but during this pandemic where we've had governments mandating things, there's no safer investment. If you knew in advance that a government was going to say everyone's got to buy this widget to stop them getting coronavirus, you're going to invest in the fucking companies that make that widget, aren't you? Because that's just a guaranteed market. Yep. And so to a much lesser extent, much less dramatic extent than we've had with the COVID pandemic. But the US government is to some degree saying an investment in OpenRAN is a fairly safe investment because we're going to be backing this shit for the long term. And the only reason that concerns me is I think it might have created an over-exuberant market for OpenRAN and related things in the short term, as opposed to when we think, and you can correct me if you think we're wrong on that, when we think it will come to full fruition, which is with 6G.
Yeah, I think there's some of it gets misconstrued because OpenRAN is getting tagged. Open interfaces and OpenRAN are tagged together. Yeah. Right. And certainly, we believe that from a governmental perspective, there should be policy about open interfaces for competition purposes. But then beyond that, it should be fair market principles. How people build it, how they develop it should be totally open to the market. It just really, comes down to the principles that, if we're going to have telecommunication networks or whatever network, we need open interfaces. Look what would happen if the car industry hadn't sorted this out. The car industry sorted it out, and you can swap wheel nuts from one car to another. But in telecommunications at the moment, you can't do that.
And that's impossible to argue.
And that's why we're in a situation we're in. And I think if government stays focused at just ensuring the policies and the frameworks are in place for open interfaces, and I think this is still the struggle in the US, because you see the government saying one thing and the three operators doing something completely different. That they say that they're in it, but in reality, every other country in the world is deploying OpenRAN apart from the three US operators.
Interesting.
So
we'll get onto them in a second. Well.
To that extent, I think and say Mavenir's view is that let's have open interface policy. Let's not have any technology mandates.
So next few years, so we will accept that OpenRAN's an inevitability. That's definitely going to be part of the mix, and will presumably be a formal part of the mix with 6G. But that's 7 or 8 years away.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yeah. So presumably part of your job relies on you not just going, get back to me in 7 years, and bigging it up between now and then. So what are going to be the increments between now and then?
But I think I think there's a certain perception out there that 5G is finished and done. It's clearly not. And I think the one thing that happened with COVID, is that people want good coverage at home, good service at home. So there's a lot more densification, if you like, to be done in networks. There's a lot of new spectrum going out there. This whole C-band discussion. New spectrum is a great place to build OpenRAN today. It can be 4G, it can be 5G, and it can even add 2G in there, right? You can take the cost out of some of these existing networks. So there's plenty of places where OpenRAN can fit today. You don't have to wait for 6G for this.
Such as?
What
you said, there's plenty of places.
Yeah,
where
so any if you like, any new license that goes out there can build with OpenRAN. The only challenge is
kind of greenfield type of
situation. So I get into this greenfield discussion because I think that's a very important point. But greenfields are perfectly okay. Look at Dish. That's a great opportunity. But we're with Airtel in India now. Building some massive network with OpenRAN there to get cost out of the network. Mm-hmm. The piece that does need to be addressed is the interfaces that should be open, such as the X interface from 3GPP, is open, and the operators are not penalized for using it, because that's again what's holding the industry back. If you could get the X2 interface open, you can build RAN. You don't have to worry about
that's between base stations.
That's between base stations, yeah, and just at that level. Yeah. Because today, you don't have a Nokia or an Ericsson integrated in the same location. Yeah. They all build their islands, and
so it's not just CIPRI, is it? There's actually a lot more.
There's a lot more.
A lot of the other stuff is 3GPP.
Yeah, and we just published a white paper on this whole brownfield greenfield thing. In reality, it's about X interfaces. Some of the carrier aggregation algorithms of when you're working across two different vendors. Yeah. Right. Getting rid of some of this proprietariness that's sitting there. So there's still a lot of work to do. Right. But there's still a lot of opportunity. That I maintain that OpenRAN's an evolution. It's not a revolution.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And to that extent, there's a lot of opportunity for everybody.
So and so that's fine. So that's a sort of measured approach on it, and maybe Ian will stop calling you the high priest of OpenRAN.
No, it wasn't said as a, it wasn't said as a criticism.
I'm just messing with you, man. I'm just messing with you.
I enjoyed running on the back of it as well.
No, I think that's a good point to sort of conclude on. What we will, well, I can only speak for myself as ever. What I'll always do, and people sometimes, I don't appreciate how it is the job of a journalist to some degree to be contrarian, but not compulsively so. I mean, credit where it's due and all that. But, what we are is we're the recipients of lots of incoming marketing messaging, and far too many journalists accept that marketing message at face value and just regurgitate it. And I think the job of a journalist is to go, well, are they talking shit or not?
Yeah, and from being right in front with some of this stuff, there needs to be a balanced view of some of this stuff. You look at some of the stuff that Nokia complained about ORAN and the big fuss that went on about ORAN. Well, in reality, all that stuff's been going on in the past. That wasn't a problem in the past, so why is it a problem now? It's so you come back to, well, these guys are just trying to protect the market or delay something, or but in reality, there's nothing new going on here. All we've done is opened up an interface.
Yeah. It's some of the claims that are made of what secondary things will happen as a result of opening up the interface, which may well all come true, but they need to be scrutinised and questioned. That's all.
Kodak is a good example, and I've used that many times, and I think the danger is there is a Kodak moment about to happen with one of the two. So
you're completely spot on, and Kodak actually had a lot of digital photography IP, didn't they? Yeah, and they sat on it.
Yep.
So it really is one of those things. Cool. All right. Well, let's move it on because we've done at least about 3/4 an hour on that, haven't we, Pierre?
55. Yeah.
55 minutes. God damn.
Well, 5 minutes on aviation.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We've run to an hour and a half in the past. Unless Pierre's going to suddenly pull rank and go, I've got to pick my kids up from school or something. No. So yes. In the States, so to recap, I mean, I think the only time we've spoken about this before was like a final item when the news first broke about this.
Yeah, basically all that Mike Dano writes about that at the moment.
Is it? Is he all over it? We should have him on this. He'll probably listen to this and go, Scott, well, fuck you're talking about.
I had to read a couple of his things before I came on.
Okay, good. Well, then you're probably more clued up than I am, so I'll defer to you. But anyway, I mean, the long and short of it is, about this time last year, the US did one of those 5G auctions that everyone does, where the government makes tons of cash for doing fuck all, other than going, you can have this bit of air. And it was for C-band, which is a sort of mid-band spectrum in it, 3 point something.
Around about 3.5, but going up a bit more than that, yeah.
Okay. Which had presumably previously been used by something else and been repurposed.
Satellite, I think, some of it.
Right. Yeah. And there was like billions of dollars involved in that.
90 billion.
There we go. I'm basically going to say a thing and then he's going to flesh it out. That's how it works. We're a double act.
He's done his homework, so that's good.
No, this thing that happened. Yes, this. And that's fine. One of the reasons that the operators pay all these billions of dollars is because people like the FCC, which is their equivalent of Ofcom, say, well, the reason you're paying all this is so that we can make sure everything's kosher, everything's fucking sorted out.
Yeah, we'll be really organised about it.
Yeah.
There'll be no problems at all afterwards.
That's what you're paying your billions for. And then, like, 11 months later, they suddenly go, yeah, that shit you just paid billions of dollars for? It turns out it's messing with certain parts of...
Well, I think it was the aviation authorities.
But the aviation people flagged it up, who presumably had plenty of opportunity to flag this shit up before the auction happened.
My main takeaway from it is that it's just a complete... cock up, isn't it? That this auction's gone and happened, and we're at this point where only now, if there is a problem, I mean, we can all sort of speculate about the extent of the problem.
But let me finish the narrative of how things have played out before we get into the analysis. So that was November. They went, hold on a minute. We've got these certain bits of safety or internal. Communication
altimeters
altimeters or something like that.
It's supposed to interfere with at a certain level.
So basically, if you make a phone call, the pilot won't know whether he's about to fly into a mountain or not. And so we need you to just pause. And so then they get in touch, and it's mainly AT&T and Verizon, not so much T-Mobile, isn't it?
It's not T-Mobile because they're mainly relying on 2.5.
Yeah,
there we
exactly.
go. So it would have been AT&T and Verizon that spent all these billions on the C-band.
So the altimeter interference comes in the sort of upper bit of the C-band, I think.
So it's 3.8 or something.
So around about 3.8, 3.9 or something.
Yeah, but I think it's worth clarifying, because what I've seen in the last few days, it just gets talked about, 5G's got a problem.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's not all
very
5G.
niche.
It's just, it's only Japan. I think it's only Japan and the US at the moment.
I didn't even know it was a thing in Japan as well.
No, well, it's Japan's only just starting to deploy in that part of the spectrum.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's band 37 is the total 3.3 to 4.2.
Yeah.
Right, whereas band 38 is 3.3 to 3.8.
Yeah.
So band 38 is fine.
Which is why it's not a problem, I'm guessing, in Europe, because they're using a slightly
So it's
lower band.
above 3.8, we're saying?
Yeah, it's the 4.2. It's
So
That's
it's
where you're
that
getting a bit
slight
American with your
difference between what's going on in the US and what's happened in Europe that is the reason.
Yeah.
Because you've asked this before, why is it not an issue in Europe?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why it's not an issue in Europe.
because we're not mucking about close to 4 gigahertz.
There's just a bigger
it's
kind
just-
of guard
right.
band, if you like.
And that's really what it comes down to, is what the definition of that guard band is about. But the way it's getting advertised is, it's all 5G's got a problem.
Well, of course.
And so suddenly, but it's only these two countries at the moment that potentially
5G's only just got over giving everyone coronavirus.
Exactly.
Now it's crashing planes.
This is not good publicity.
To be fair, there's this whole thing is, for as long as I've been in the US, I built the Pac Bell network in California, and at the time the 1.9 frequencies were let. There was a problem with microwave links in the 1.9 band.
Right.
And to the extent of, and I need to be careful what I say, but in the sense that
Have another beer, John.
people were using the leverage that they had of microwave in that 1.9 band to get money to replace old equipment.
Yeah.
Right. And that generally tends to see what happens in the US, like the TV bans and all of that, that they use the auction to get more money to refund and redo equipment. So, probably somebody in the FAA saying, okay, well, we can replace all the altimeters in airplanes, for instance.
So someone who's really
Right.
cynical, who's really cynical could say that this is the aviation industry coming on and going, hang on a minute.
Or even a specific
we can make
altimeter
this
player.
out to be a really big issue, and then we can get
Now we've got to go and look
bit
up
of
who
money and
does-
fund their overhaul of this altimeters.
Who
will
makes
get
Yank
solved.
altimeters? I'm
Yeah.
going to
But
Google it.
you go through the same issues like Legato and Spectrum. You've got the C-band auction spectrum here now. You've got the 1.9 spectrum that I was directly involved in. So this is nothing new in the US.
No, so the sort of farcical bit has been how it played out. So November it first came up, and it was the aviation people going, hold on a minute. And then the FCC got in touch with AT&T and Verizon and went, look, I know you were about to get going on this early December. And they got in touch with them like 2 weeks to go or something. Can you just hold on? And they said, well, fuck off. And then someone had a word, someone like Pete Buttigieg or whatever his name is, got involved, the Secretary of Transport.
Yeah.
And they went, all right then, all right.
It's clear.
1st of January or 5th of January, we'll hold on for one more month, all right? And then that's it. And then we got to the 5th of January, and then Pete Buttigieg got involved again.
I think the latest concession is just not building 5G base stations
Well, exactly.
around airports.
So that's where we've got to. So then they put it
But-
off for 2 more weeks. And then every time it gets to a deadline, they have to make one more concession. So I'm actually completely on the side of the operators on this one.
So they can charge a premium for Wi-Fi at the airport.
Could be,
I just think it's ridiculous that it's got through a stage where they've spent 90 billion on spectrum. We've known this is happening, and then all of a sudden the altimeter people are coming out and going, "Oh, hang on a minute, it's causing problems."
I don't know.
I think it's just kind of outrageous.
Yeah, but
really.
maybe I've been too close to it with other examples.
Yeah.
But to me, this is business as normal, right? And in reality,
But it's quite a US thing, isn't it? Like you say? I mean,
absolutely.
it's interesting that you say that because we had a good freelance piece on it by a guy called Paddy Belton who does stuff for us sometimes. But he's sort of asking the question, why is it not an issue in Europe? And he was saying one of the reasons is just sort of the way that US agencies and US interests get involved in these disputes and the kind of lobbying that goes on in the US, which doesn't really happen in the same way in Europe.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and the fact that because the US has not been harmonised in spectrum and the way it's been moving things around.
He did say spectrum guard bands was another reason, but
but there's nothing stopping them building base stations, providing there's guard bands in there. And you say, look, okay, the spectrum they have now is like band 37, which is the 900 megahertz worth.
Yeah.
Who's going to use 900 megahertz of spectrum.
Yeah.
In one go. It's there for
That's
growth.
some proper MIMO there, isn't it?
I just worry
exactly.
about we were talking about the sort of ridiculous 5G causing coronavirus thing that went on last year, and
which we got tons of traffic from.
If you're a conspiracy theorist, then there are loads of those people around these days. Let's be honest. And you're seeing all this stuff about 5G bringing down airplay. This is not good publicity for the telecom industry, is it?
No, 5G's got some bad press.
5G's not in a good place at the moment, I don't think, really.
Especially as it's a bit shit anyway.
But I think to keep it level, I think clearly that people are working together to solve the problem, and it will get solved.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And
it just feels like there's some brinkmanship. It always comes down to the deadline. And we were talking about how things are done in the US. I find a lot of the podcasts I listen to are US, and I try and listen across the spectrum. Like I'll listen to Ben Shapiro from the conservative side, and I'll listen to Joe Rogan, who's sort of a neutral, and I'll listen to some people who are like breaking points that are more sympathetic to the political leftist side. But all of them seem to be united in the fact that there's just so much bad faith, factional, short-termist sort of land grabbing stuff going on the whole time. It's basically like House of Cards all the time, it seems. And I'm sure we're not much better. We've got plenty of political scandals going on in the UK. I'm sure,
it just works in a different way.
But in the States, they just seem to take it to that next level of absolutely naked, shameless self-interest and short-termism. So I find it completely believable forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, to go with what John has inferred, that there are just interested parties pushing this along. We couldn't name them, and we probably wouldn't for legal reasons anyway.
Look at the OpenRAN debate. It's the same issues. There's OpenRAN camp want funding on this side. The current incumbents, because to them it's the richest market in the world.
Yeah.
They're trying to stop everything. Hang on to that market for the best they can.
Yeah.
But eventually it will get sorted.
It will eventually get sorted, but in the meanwhile, AT&T and Verizon are out of pocket. Whatever their plans are for their customers, for their subscribers regarding 5G rollout is delayed.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because
no, you don't think that?
There's enough 5G going on.
There's a lot of 5G going on anyway, and I think maybe one of the main reasons.
So do you think they're crying a bit theatrically?
Well, I don't think they're crying theatrically, because the main argument for one of the main arguments for deploying 5G in Europe is just to free up capacity, isn't it, really, and shift traffic onto a more efficient technology and not have overly congested 4G networks. And I'm sure they want to be able to use this spectrum that they spent a huge amount of money on and not just have it sitting around, not being used. I think that's the issue,
the cash
really.
For a reason.
I don't think they're not going to make more money at the moment from 5G, are they? Because nobody is really. There might be a slight incremental ARPU increase, but
you've seen the push over the last few weeks. Suddenly they're becoming a broadband, in the home provider. All these boxes are now appearing where, they're becoming a fixed wireless access guys. And so
Verizon's got to find some way of stepping back from its heavy on the millimeter wave thing, which turned out, I think, was a complete bullshit strategy. But maybe it'll pay off in the long term.
Yeah.
But right now, we always joke that you've got to be sitting on a base station before you can get something from it.
It surely has a role in indoor deployments and factory deployments,
and small cells and private networks, industrial.
But it's probably just too early, really. Trying to position it as a consumer thing, I don't think was probably.
Well, but I think the one thing COVID has sadly brought out, in a sense, that the dependency on fixed wireless access is probably more important now than mobility.
Yeah.
So people, they do need the densification of spectrum, if you like, or using large swaths of spectrum so they can get the densification out there. You're either going to build more cell sites or use more spectrum. You've only got those two choices, and I think that's part of the issue that they're sort of trying to get at. Because there's 65 billion just been allocated for fixed wireless access deployments by the US government. That money's approved. So there's a lot of people going after fixed wireless access money, which you can do with wireless.
Yeah. And
so why can't they turn that spectrum and use that for doing this? And so I think there's other influences around some of this than just mobility.
Fair enough. All right, let's move that one on. Go on to the last segment as I start my fourth beer, like the proper fucking lad that I am.
Small beers, though.
They're small beers. Yeah, it's not like John who you know.
No, I tell you,
But he hasn't got 3-4 of them.
I've been speaking too much, and the beer tastes good. So
Yeah, well, and you've got a reputation to protect. I don't. So there's a difference there. I can be pissed and just talk shit. No one has any other expectations of me.
Yeah. Well, that is the expectation.
Well, quite.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. Briefly teeing it up before handing on to you, Ian. Microsoft bid $10 zillion.
67.5, I think, is the exact.
68.7.
Oh, right.
Unless Andrew fucked up the headline.
No, it's 68.7.
To buy Activision Blizzard, which, as the name implies, was itself the product of M&A of two massive games developers, Activision and Blizzard. Activision's done things like... what have they done? They've done things like Call of Duty, I think.
I don't know which came out of which one.
Yeah, and they're also part of King Studios was also
Candy
bought by
Crush.
them. So Candy Crush was King, and they're part of that.
Warcraft.
I think Call of Duty was Activision, and Blizzard's Warcraft. Anyway, massive. You know,
Tony Hawk
it's
Pro
like...
Skater.
You what?
Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
He's a person to ask
Tony
about
Hawk
it.
Pro Skater.
I don't play video games anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, but it was
I remember
only
that logo.
recently that you stopped.
God, I've been playing a 10-year-old version of Civilization recently. I'm a bit of a turn-based sort of strategy guy. I do it while I listen to podcasts. That's how I listen to most of my podcasts. I play a game and then turn the volume down on the game and then listen to the podcast.
Can you start a pandemic in Civilization?
No, that'll be in version 7.
Like a feature.
Oh, a special skill.
Like a cheeky pandemic, you know. That's
Cheeky, just a little mini pandemic. Anyway, so this acquisition would represent a big chunk of all the games that you get, not just on consoles and PCs.
I think it'll make them
but
number
also
3
on
in the
mobile.
world as a gaming company.
Right, yeah,
The biggest one, interestingly, which I wouldn't have known until I started looking into the deal, was Tencent.
Right.
Tencent's the biggest gaming
But
company
that's mainly
in the world.
mobile gaming.
Well, I don't know what it is, but they're the big, and I guess it's just because they're Chinese, and like the Chinese have got a lot of avid gamers, and if you've got a country of 1.4 billion people,
it's
then
going to be large.
there's a lot of them.
Well, there's still companies like EA, which used to be a massive big deal 20 years ago. You hear about them less these days. I always used to play like the EA sports games like Madden Football.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the gaming market well enough.
But Microsoft fancy, 69 billion bucks from
let's call it
Microsoft
70,
says that it
roughly.
fancies getting involved. Yeah, 70. And the question is, Microsoft can obviously afford it. This is a cash thing. It's not even stock.
Yeah.
They're just going, we got this 69 bill.
Yeah.
It's doing fuck all. It's earning 2% in the
I bet
bank.
they've not got much cash now, though, after that.
Apple
was a company that always had a lot of cash on its books, and it's got a lot less than it used to have.
Apple's got sick cash. I wrote...
it's come down by... it used to have like 200-odd billion, and it's now 70 billion.
But that's mainly through share buybacks and shit like that, isn't it? So it's still got the cash. It's just
still got
in the
a lot
form of
cash,
Apple stock now.
But if it did that, it wouldn't have any.
Yeah, then that would empty the bank and they'd have to...
But Ericsson had a lot of cash until it bought... what's it called?
Vonage.
Nobody thought it was going to buy.
Do you know all I get? Whenever you know how
now it's got no cash at all.
You know how on the internet you get served ads that are sort of algorithmically determined to what you might be into.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but ever since I wrote about the Ericsson acquisition of Vonage, all I get is fucking Vonage ads.
Ah, brilliant! That's all you
I just
want.
get these ads, and I don't give a toss. I mean, I barely heard of Vonage before they bought them.
Well, I knew them in their first incarnation as a kind of voice-over IP company causing problems for Comcast and all this lot. But
And I'll say, I actually don't think YouTube, which is where I see most of these ads, because that's where I listen to my podcast when I'm playing Civilization and shit. I don't think they're doing them any favours, because now I feel actively hostile to Vonage for the amount of times it's interrupted my podcast. I think they need to mix it up. I don't think they're doing their clients any favours by spamming them with their ads. Anyway, so they're buying this games company, and you sort of think, okay, on one level, they've got Xbox. They're one of the 3 oligopoly of console gaming console makers.
Got Minecraft.
And they already bought Minecraft, and they're obviously also a massive player in the PC gaming market as well. And also Nintendo's in its own little crazy Japanese world most of the time anyway. So it's mainly, in terms of people, if they're not going to get Nintendo, they're choosing between Xbox and PlayStation, aren't they? And so there's the sort of competition worry about how if one of the platform owners also owns a lot of the games, then they can starve the other platform of the games, which is going to create a monopoly.
Yep.
But The other thing they mentioned, almost in passing in their press release, but when I was chatting to Andrew, wrote this up, but I was doing my editor thing of bouncing ideas backwards and forwards to sort of refine the angle, and I was going, the fact that they mentioned, I think I used a sort of really silly analogy. If someone says they're buying a car company for the cars and the fruit, then the interesting angle is why are they talking about the fruit? Obviously, they're buying it for the fucking cars.
Yeah.
But why are they suddenly going on about fruit? And that's kind of what Microsoft did. They said, we're buying this because of the games and also the metaverse.
Yeah.
So I thought the metaverse was the interesting angle, and you seem to have agreed because you read some stuff on it.
Yeah, I mean, but no one really knows what the metaverse is at the moment. That's the thing. It's this term that was first coined in a science fiction novel about 30 years ago, and that Facebook seized hold of and now has named its own company after it.
It's so into it.
And I think the general idea is that it's some kind of virtual reality gateway into a world of largely games at first, it seems. But I think the idea is you could also sort of interact socially and carry out
just
work
a whole
meetings.
digital world.
It's a bit like what Second Life was trying to do.
All that type of stuff.
Yeah, Second Life back in the day. It's basically where we all become a brain in a jar and we all live like in the Matrix.
The thing is, like, unlike Ready Player One, where everyone is playing,
it is a bit like Ready Player One.
Yeah, but Ready Player One, everyone is playing in the same.
They are.
universe.
Well, this is the thing. There's going to be
There's
metaverses.
so many metaverses
yeah,
right
this
now.
is the
Yeah.
thing. Is there going to be
Competing
one
metaverses.
metaverse? Because
Maybe we'll have Metaverse War.
But the interesting thing is that
home.
they're almost pushing it as a successor to the internet, but it's not going to be a successor to the internet because you won't, like Pierre just said, you won't have one metaverse. You'll probably have several metaverses. And
so Apple is releasing their own VR headset, and they'll have their own VR app store.
Unless
everyone wants to have control of it. It's back to the OpenRAN thing. Everyone wants to control the scenario.
Yeah. And then maybe it's a question then of whether it's better to have one metaverse or I don't know. But I just think because we can just write about pure tech, and it's interesting as well just to do that on our websites. But then you have to sort of think, what does this mean for telcos?
Which is supposed to be our job. I'm constantly haunted by the URL of my website.
It's not, but it's not just and before you get to the metaverse, the whole idea of cloud gaming, which I think is like a step to that. We had Google Stadia, been the big deal being made about that a couple of years ago. There's already been talk. I think The Economist wrote quite a good piece about a lot of Microsoft's efforts.
More or less, they're kind of rebadging it as a white label.
This is what Microsoft could try to do with the Activision Blizzard takeover, is trying to position it more as something you can do through the cloud and not have to have intelligent consoles, and it can be accessed through, edge data centers and stuff. And then you start to think about what this means for operators, because you look at the pandemic and where it's left, and I looked back at BT's whole little sort of tracking of data traffic over the last 2 years, and like when the pandemic started, they went, oh, things are okay. Our network's built to withstand about 7.5 terabits a second.
Yeah, a little bit of Zoom
and it's only about it's gone up. Sorry, our network's built to withstand 17, and it's only gone up to about 7.5. You look at December that's just gone, and Mark Alera's writing, we had 25.5 terabits per second peak.
Wow.
Just from them streaming, just from Amazon streaming 6 Premiership matches.
Yep.
And everybody watching
it. They shat themselves on that.
And I even went and met with Mark Alera because I wrote this very critical thing about operators' sort of stance on neutrality. And they got in touch and went, he wants to have a chat with you. And they were like, look, if this
Mark's not happy.
But I can, the whole net neutrality thing, we can sort of, that's a whole other topic for discussion. But certainly in terms of the pressure that data is putting on networks and where that leaves operators and whether they can make money out of it, I think the metaverse is quite a scary thing for them, because they've not, the track record of them doing well out of people using data services and that leading to a big increase in revenues has not been,
that's the other thing. Again,
story's not been there. And
to skirt around the net neutrality thing, I think we might have chatted about it on the pod before. We've certainly spoken about it to each other when you got people like I think it was SKT in Korea.
That was Squid Game,
getting the arsehole because everyone was streaming Squid Game.
Yep.
And so you got this weird paradigm where the whole raison d'etre of CSPs, communication service providers, is to provide the pipe through which people access stuff.
Yeah. Principally
in terms of the volume of data, video. And then when people do too much of this thing that they're there to help them do, then they start freaking out.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? What's going on here?
I was one of these people a few years ago, when there was all this talk about, do we need fibre? Do we need higher speed mobile? Going, I remember writing articles saying there's not really a need for it because the services aren't there. But at the moment, you could make the argument that if things like this happen and we have VR and the metaverse and cloud gaming, networks all of a sudden don't really look capable of handling a lot of the stuff that's going on. And yet the companies that are providing those services aren't making a lot of money out of it. They can't sign more people up to broadband because everybody has a broadband connection. All of a sudden, this move away from metered pricing doesn't look it looks a bit regrettable, doesn't it?
But the genie's out.
And the genie's out of the bottle, and then they're trying to sort of compensate for that by raising the whole net neutrality thing again and saying maybe internet companies should pay for it, but that's a whole political
content
debate.
Providers.
I just think it puts them in a slightly awkward position business model wise. Now maybe they can come up with some kind of revenue sharing arrangements with these companies that are acceptable. Maybe they can.
But the companies aren't going to do it unless they're forced.
Maybe they can come up with
not going to hand over any more
tariffs
cash than it has to.
No, it's not. I know it's not going to be an easy thing for them to do, and nobody will be optimistic about it. But what I'm saying is that maybe there could be models where they're partnering with an AWS or a Microsoft Azure on edge rollouts, and they're sharing some of the revenues that the companies are making.
But I think this just goes back to the whole OpenRAN.
It does
spectrum.
Go back to OpenRAN,
This is why people are pushing for more spectrum, because they see some of this happening, and I think you got to get equipment prices back to where they back to being competitive and the competition out there to make some of this happen.
Hence the interest, which I can understand in things like OpenRAN,
exactly.
if it can lower prices, which the operators are.
We'll see.
No. Well, so I, one message here. The FCC did a great job in publishing the handbook of prices.
Yep.
And verified the pricing that OpenRAN is 40% on a capex basis cheaper. And then you go back and look at what Dish is doing and moving half their network into the cloud, and they're not having to make that investment, right? So suddenly, the game is changing. So they've got OpenRAN on the radio and DU. The rest is in Amazon Cloud. So they've minimised their capital expense and minimised their operational expense, and they're going to give the other operators a run for their money.
Yeah.
So
that'll be it.
happening.
I mean, that'll be it. And back to the Vodafone thing, the fact that Vodafone is invested enough in OpenRAN to roll out 2,500 sites shows it's not fucking around. It's taking it seriously.
But in reality, the UK could do with like 7,000 sites. I think that.
Yeah.
I think when I left the UK, it was great. You come back now and it sucks. It's
be interesting to chat to the Neil McRae from BT again. If obviously Vodafone's only done about like 2/3 of a site so far.
Yeah.
But when it actually does start doing it properly, when the antenna stuff catches up, and it's whacking out thousands of these things, it'd be interesting to check back. It'd be great to get him on the pod, obviously.
Yeah.
Check back with him, with McRae and him going, yeah, all right, fair enough, or not.
Well, he might not though, because we don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah,
He might go, well, I told you that was going to happen.
No,
There's
totally.
enough deployments going on elsewhere in the world to watch this. Dish is getting close, and there was the trial analysis. I think Signals Research did the mapping of Vegas just recently there, and so that's getting ready.
So do you think, just to wrap it up, we've more or less done the metaverse thing. I mean, there's all sorts of tangents occurred to me that we could go off on the metaverse thing in terms of
you could get lost in there.
Who owns it. I mean, one other point I'll make, just to gently push back on your pivot back to OpenRAN when we were talking about that. I mean, most metaverse activities can be done over fixed line anyway.
Yep.
So it could be as much an issue for
you're not going to be walking down the street in your virtual reality headset,
Scott,
I mean? Bumping into people.
Everyone's going to have to wear like padding so they look like a Michelin man, just so they can walk around in their virtual
You need
world.
one of those like omnidirectional treadmills in your kitchen so that you can.
You need the digital twin of
I'm
your home.
Being the wrong side of 50, I'm feeling decidedly Luddite about all this.
I did play VR with my nephews. I think they have Oculus Quest 2 over Christmas, and I played the rock climbing one. It's kind of fun, but like you hang over a cliff and I would step into emptiness, and you're really thrown by it for a little bit. But then I did get bored of it.
You didn't run headfirst into the telly?
No, but I did get bored of it after like 2 days. I was like, okay, what else? And all the games they had, apparently the only thing you can get is really zombie shooting. That's all you could play.
I'll tell you what philosophically...
So it always comes back to zombies.
Like just shooting.
What philosophically bothers me about the whole concept of the metaverse is the more the Matrix thing. Mm-hmm. You're a real organic person with a finite life, with senses. it's authenticity and
yeah,
reality.
well, the Matrix is like Ready Player One gone bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just people sitting in their kitchens or running into the backs of their sofas. It's like
the Matrix is like an ultimate extrapolation of it. But I like real things. I mean, could you virtually sit in a studio talking to people about telecoms and drinking a punk IPA and
guys,
have the same
the guys at the University of
this?
Surrey who are looking into 6G, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it so that the 6G is you can actually smell and taste.
Yeah, well, so you got that bit in the Matrix, haven't you, where the guy, the turncoat guy,
breathing.
the turncoat guy talks about how I know this is virtual, but it tastes like a juicy steak. Type of stuff.
Yeah, the strawberry discussion.
And then there's that as well. I mean,
you could be a martial arts expert, though, Scott.
So then you got two things that are interesting. Have you ever? This is a complete tangent. Have you ever had a dream where you sort of knew it was a dream while it was still happening?
Yeah, and you control things a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like sometimes sometimes it could be a nightmare. And I can remember having like mild nightmares where I've reassured myself that this is just bullshit. This is just a dream.
It happens to me sometimes.
Yeah. And so there's the interesting
Scott, I'm
thing.
the only one with you, apparently.
Yeah, no, everyone else, they're just going, okay, Scott's on his fourth fucking beer. He hasn't drunk for 3 weeks.
Yeah, this is what happens when you went dry January early.
Yeah, but I just wonder with the metaverse, so you've got the incremental stage, which is obviously you're in the metaverse, but that has its limitations.
Yeah.
So surely there's a limited amount of pleasure you can get, even if you get some really fucked up attachments to the metaverse.
Yeah.
But then to really be immersive, you've got to sort of not know you're in it, but that creates all kinds of other philosophical issues.
The Matrix is like there's another film called Strange Days with Ray Fiennes and Catherine Bigelow who directed in 1999 and the Turn of the Millennium. And that's quite a freaky.
Which one?
Right,
Strange Days.
Oh,
you kind of plug
by
in.
James Cameron. Yeah.
Yes, his wife. Catherine Bigelow, I think it is. Who did
Mrs.
Ray Fiennes is the and who else is in it?
Catherine Bigelow, isn't she the one that did that Iraq?
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah.
Zero Dark 30 and the bomb one.
That's a good film. Yeah, the bomb one.
There was a Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker.
Yes.
Hurt Locker.
But you sort of plug something into the back of your neck. I can't remember the clip, and it takes you into a sort of virtual reality world. But it's like actually being in another place. The virtual reality is so sophisticated that you feel like you're somewhere else.
You're
and
just
smell
committed
and
to
taste.
it.
Yeah.
Go and watch that one.
But you'll still know. You'll still know.
Like
even in the
film.
Matrix, once they got blue pilled or red pilled, not blue pilled.
Yeah.
Got to get my pills right. This is a very internet culture thing. Everything's a fucking pill in internet culture. Anyway, once they're red pilled, when they go into the Matrix, they know they're in the Matrix.
Yeah. Well, we could all be in that kind of world at the moment. And we don't know about
that's
it.
exactly what I was saying. We're actually part of it.
This is actually one seriously taken philosophical argument.
Air
That we're really
breathing?
like that.
Are we all in a construct and so on?
Yeah. Time to end.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to wrap up, isn't it? Because it's all gone crazy.
Simulation.
Well, thank you for visiting our simulation.
A pleasure. I enjoyed the Matrix discussion. I'm a fan of the Matrix. So.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, it just
seen the new one
it
yet,
just
though.
makes you think.
I heard mixed reviews of the new
The new one's good.
I heard
Is it?
Yeah,
I have to watch
Oh
the new
God, the
one.
reviews I've had were not positive.
Oh no, yeah.
You enjoyed it? Did
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Okay.
I've seen mixed ones.
Took a bit to get into it because you've got to remember you've got to really stretch your mind back what happened on the.
Did you
previous
like 2 and 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's it. You get some purists. I definitely like the first one much more than the sequel.
I liked the first two. I didn't particularly like 3.
Right.
I liked
Same.
the first two. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I always end up with, am I in this or am I watching
Right.
it?
Okay. Well, I think you've actually been here for this last hour and a half, and I thank you for it. So
pleasure.
we're going to pop to the pub. Is that the plan?
Yep.
Cool. Which is why I was going to actually tough it out and not drink until Ian, who's over there in the background, proposed the pub. I was like, nah, man, I've got to have a drink. So if I'm going to have a drink in a pub, I might as well drink on the goddamn pod. Was my thinking. So there we are. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next time you're in the UK, feel free to let us know, and I'm sure we'll be able to make time for you.
Yeah, and Mobile Congress is soon upon us. So.
That's true. Yeah. We'll have to sort out a meeting.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can school my Padawan Andrew.
Okay.
Get him up to speed on OpenRAN.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, happy to help.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Great chatting to you. And thank you for listening. And make sure you join us for the next one.